Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar number 4. This is the final webinar in our series that we're doing here at Frontenac Arch Biosphere with GreenStep. So welcome to Adam and Christy from GreenStep and to all of our businesses. I just want to thank you all for your participation over the past 4 months. And you've all been working really hard on your action plans and learning about all these new terms that come with sustainability and this whole new idea of what sustainable tourism is and how we can change those practices in our own workplaces. So appreciate everybody coming tonight. And with that, I'm going to pass things off to Adam at GreenStep.
All righty. Thank you for the introduction, Noelle. And let me get set up. So good evening, everyone. Can you see my screen? Perfect. So thank you for joining us tonight for the 4th and final webinar, where we're going to focus on sharing your sustainability story. Tonight, I will be leading the webinar, and Christy is here from GreenStep as well to support and monitor the chat. So if you have any questions or comments you'd like to share, please share them in that chat, or you can also use the raise hand feature on Zoom or just interrupt, and we're going to have a good conversation, keep it casual tonight. Tonight, I'm presenting on the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people who have stewarded and cared for the lands where I live, work, and play for time immemorial. And a few housekeeping notes before we begin, just reemphasizing that this session is being recorded and you'll have a link to access that within a few days of the event. And you're welcome to share this recording with your colleagues and your friends and teams. And then if you do wish to review any of these previous webinars, they're also hosted on the FAB business page. So tonight, we're going to cover building a sustainability story, sharing your sustainability story, marketing the FAB badge, where we'll discuss some of the outcomes of this webinar series, as well as provide additional resources that can be used as you continue on your journey. And as we mentioned, this is the last webinar of the series, and we've come such a long way. So I'd like to briefly revisit some of the steps that we've taken on our journey before diving into the best practices around how to share that. So we've just about made it through the first cycle of GreenStep's sustainable tourism framework. And as we've gone through this series, we've raised awareness, we've improved our knowledge, and built capacity around sustainability, creating this understanding of how we can apply the principles of sustainability to our own businesses and our own organizations. And that first step in the journey was developing a common language, which included learning about the frameworks and the approaches and how to assess and address sustainability in the context of tourism. We then used that common language from webinar 1 to create this baseline of understanding around the vocabulary, as well as how we're already doing as an organization with the Sustainable Tourism Assessment, which gave us a snapshot when we took that assessment of what are we doing and how does that contribute to sustainability. Later in webinars 2 and 3, we kept on moving through the cycle of continuous improvement, and we used those results to create visions and goals and targets and actions. So now, based on the first 3 webinars, you should be ready to take action and implement and improve the sustainability of your business, which simultaneously means improving that sustainability score. But a sustainability score is not the only outcome of this process. We're here to better our communities, better our relation with the environment and culture. And when we think about how we share our sustainability story, it's so much more than the number. It's much, much more than just the score. So when we have guests, especially if they're unfamiliar with sustainability, being able to share the meaning behind the actions in a very authentic and transparent way will allow you to really capture the benefit of the sustainability advantage. And whether that's communicating with your visitors or your residents or staff or other key stakeholders in the tourism industry, we're going to cover some best practices tonight on how to approach sharing your story. But first, to make sure everyone's all warmed up and ready to share, I got an icebreaker for you. How much does a polar bear weigh? Enough to break the ice. Ha ha ha. I'm sure some of you have heard that before, but if anyone else has a favorite joke, could be a good joke or a bad joke or a dad joke, and you want to warm it up, I'd love to hear them.
Okay, so I have one, Adam.
Let's hear it.
What's the best thing about Switzerland?
What?
I don't know, but its flag is a big plus.
That's funny because I'm from Switzerland.
Ah, how appropriate.
Oh, that's awesome. Anyone else got one that they like? I know it's a little bit putting you on the spot to pull one out of your back pocket. Alrighty, we'll just move along then. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. But we're going to first look into building a sustainability story. So what are those components? And keep in mind that this is going to look different for each business, community, or region. But with all of the learning and growing that we've done from this webinar series, there's a lot of material that we can use in crafting our sustainability story. So reflecting back on the first webinar, when you're building your sustainability story, you may want to consider some of those key learnings from the first webinar. So that may include how the actions your organization is taking fit into the history of sustainability, or if you resonated with a sustainable tourism framework, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, that might be something you wish to include in your story. And I'll give a quick example around how you could do that. So if you are working on a farm and you do regenerative agriculture, perhaps you really align with some of those UN SDGs, such as zero hunger or water conservation. And by tapping into that with your sustainability story, it shows how you connect to the larger global goal of sustainable development and how your individual contributions go and create positive change on a larger scale. So in this first webinar, we provide a lot of those best practices, examples of leading organizations, and some of those guiding principles that you may wish to refer back to, again, available online for you to review at your own time. In the second webinar, it was a lot about sharing. We took that sustainable tourism assessment at the end of workshop 1, and in workshop 2, we came together to share our strengths as well as areas of opportunity for improvement. And then in the process, we did the exercise where we were guided through the development of a sustainability vision. And this was an idea of what your organization could look like with no barriers, a total sustainable future, one that was supported by your clients, your guests, your staff, your community, and maybe even the government. And we had great sharing and a lot of amazing ideas that connected the purpose of many of the businesses with their broader contributions to the environment, community, and culture. And one of the things that I found really powerful about that sharing was that a lot of you were tapping into the regenerative potential of tourism, the ability for tourism to leave things better than they originally were. And then in that third webinar, the last one that we did, we developed action plans, complete with goal areas, smart targets, and actions. Side note, whoever can remember what the SMART acronym stands for and can put that in the chat, I think, Noel, you should give them some of that FAB swag. If anyone remembers
That's right. We've got prizes tonight for everyone's participation. When you're answering questions in the chat function, you're going to win some fabulous FAB swag.
Yeah, so if anyone remembers what SMART, that acronym stands for, yeah, go ahead and unmute and share or put it in the chat.
Yeah, okay, it was already said. But yeah. Quick.
Oh, I would love if you shared.
That's great. Annabelle from the Thousand Islands Boat Museum. I don't know if you can see me because Adam's screen sharing, but you've won this fabulous t-shirt. There you go. This is our Species at Risk t-shirts. So you're gonna see here one of our painted turtles, and it's got the FAB logo. So that's coming your way. Thank you very much.
and plenty more prizes tonight, so don't worry. Congratulations on the first one. And yeah, so we had all of these components, and we can think of these as bits and pieces of our sustainability story. And as these pieces come together, there's a momentum that was developed. And when we reflect back to that exercise where we created these favorite breakout actions, we were sharing perspective and gaining expertise. And maybe you took some inspiration from your peers on how to advance sustainability. And these are all elements that can be incorporated into your sustainability story. And a really good way to think about sustainability is that it's a journey. So taking those storytelling elements of what goes into a good journey story, where there's perhaps there's a challenge. So that could be what maybe that was what inspired you to join us in this webinar series, or a challenge that you faced in trying to become more sustainable, or something that you struggled to learn with and have had to go on and do more research to understand from what we've been working on. There's this example of learning and growing that goes into a sustainability story. For many people, sustainability is totally new. And there are many, many examples of learning from the previous webinars, but this could also mean learning and growing with your own personal experiences in sustainability. And then with teamwork and collaboration, sometimes it takes a village. And for sustainability, I believe it's just that. When the webinar breakout rooms, we had a cross-pollination of ideas, and there are at times where there's maybe more local issues where you see a community coming together with teamwork and collaboration to address that, as well as things that may be happening on your organization or within your team. And then in terms of planning and action, last week we developed those action plans. So if you follow them, you'll inevitably have lots of stories to tell, stories of success and some setbacks. And something important that I'd like to remind you is that if you do not achieve the results you expected, don't be discouraged. Setbacks are part of every good journey. It's this opportunity to dive back into the cycle. That's your challenge that allows you to learn and grow and build new connections, plan and take action, and pretty much you'll be achieving and celebrating. And keep in mind that if sustainability was easy, everyone would be doing it. So we all have a lot of learning and growing. So with that information, I'd like you to write down an instance or an example where you experienced a challenge, learning and growing, maybe an instance of teamwork or collaboration, a key takeaway from that planning and action, and then a success or setback. And I wasn't planning on sharing these now, but using them later in the webinar, but maybe Noelle has some more swag she wants to give away. So we're going to give everyone 5 minutes to think of them, and then we will resume. So just take a moment and write an example of one of each down, whether that's from the webinar series or in your own personal experience.
May I ask a question meanwhile?
Yeah.
I briefly wanted to ask how I could access the other webinars because I understood that I should also be able to access them because I only recently got informed about this webinar. So I did miss the other ones.
So Adam, I will find that link and put it in the chat.
Perfect. Amazing. Thanks.
I can also follow up with you, Nina, in an email afterwards as well, and I can send you the links to those webinars.
Many thanks.
Yeah, so we'll give about 1 more minute here before we wrap up and move on. Just get your final thoughts down. And maybe actually, since we have prizes to give out, if someone's brave and wants to share their sustainability journey, their little notes from each section, we'll give out a prize here as well.
I see a few people are adding in the chats. Does anybody want to expand and share that?
Yeah, there's some really awesome stories in the chat. Definitely some strong communication that could be developed. So let's continue on. So in addition to using this kind of information, this very story-driven approach to sharing your sustainability story, you may also be interested in creating a sustainability report. So this is slightly different than some of the marketing strategies that we're going to suggest tonight. And a sustainability report is typically a more formal document that includes information about your organization, its commitment, a summary of your targets, the actions, initiatives, and then some of those successes and feedbacks, setbacks as well as any future plans. And this report is usually very example driven and should be updated annually, which helps to establish transparency, but it also allows you to track your own progress where you have this formal report filled out year to year that you can reflect back on for yourselves. So when you're drafting a sustainability report, the data is really powerful, and that's what's driving the story here. And this adds credibility to your communication across all platforms. So whether that's for visitors or residents or staff or industry stakeholders. And even if you're already sharing how important sustainability is to your organization, using the track data or the assessment, the Sustainable Tourism Score assessment results, which would go into the report, having numbers to put behind your claims allows you to speak more clearly to your current performance as well as any achievements. And if you have any questions around what kind of language or content to include in a sustainability report, again, I recommend going back to that first webinar to look at some of those examples, best practices, leading organizations, as well as frameworks that you can use for drafting that report. So now we're going to go on to sharing your sustainability story. With this idea of what your sustainability story could be, we're now going to kind of transition into how should you share that and what are some of the best practices. And the first thing that I'd like to address is greenwashing. It's a little bit of an elephant in the room when you're talking about sharing a sustainability story. And greenwashing is marketing untrue, unsupported, or misleading information that claims an organization's products or services are more environmentally sound than they truly are. It's a big issue. And with the increase in demand for more sustainable products and services, greenwashing has become more widespread. And greenwashing is very bad, not only for the moral components, but it could also damage your organization's reputation and in some cases be illegal. And while greenwashing is something you should be aware of, it is very easily avoided by following some simple best practices. I'm going to quickly run through them, but we'll dive deeper into each of these this evening. So number one, aim for transparency in action and authenticity in communication. Number two, publish your baseline metrics to showcase clear and quantifiable improvements. Number three, acknowledge your missed targets. Negative impacts are just opportunities for improvement. If you didn't meet that target, that means it's still there and an opportunity. And being able to address that and speak to that helps add credibility and avoid greenwashing, which leads to best practice 4, using credible and verified data to back up your claims. And that rolls right into regularly publishing updates that showcases that continuous improvement, and then engaging in third-party verification where possible. And when we discuss marketing your sustainability story, we mean telling an honest and meaningful story that contains both the successes and the failures, but it doesn't include exaggeration. Now, something you may not have heard of, but is just as prevalent, is green hushing. So as greenwashing has become larger and larger, this counter phenomenon of green hushing has also begun to arise. Green hushing is the conscious act of underreporting sustainability practices to avoid scrutiny. And remember, sustainability is a journey, and we shouldn't be afraid to share our story. So while there careful consideration should be taken to avoid greenwashing, failing to communicate your sustainability initiatives can be perceived by some as green hushing. And marketing green initiatives helps to inspire others and can lead to new collaborative partnerships. So we should minimize green hushing by following a few other key practices, such as only marketing initiatives and actions that are currently underway and complete, using consistent language and branding amongst stakeholders within your destination, involving visitors and stakeholders in your destination sustainability goals, using quantifiable or science-based targets for sustainability goals, and then trying to always present a reliable and trustworthy image of your efforts. And while there are many reasons why a business may green hush, the reality is that by not sharing the authentic and ongoing initiatives that you're working hard on, the greenwashers control the narrative. So by sharing your story, you're combating greenwashing. And despite all these challenges around sharing the story, there are some significant benefits. Not only does sharing your sustainability story combat greenwashing, but it can also inspire change that aligns with the key principles of sustainable and regenerative tourism. With that, you might be inspiring people as you share on what you're doing, and they might want to take that action themselves. Sustainability can also be a market differentiator that attracts new businesses or leads to new product offerings, and it can enhance your resilience to disruption. The other key point that I want to speak to is that sustainability can often enhance guest experiences. And this is when we have to think about sustainability on that social cultural level. So for instance, if your business or your experience is wheelchair accessible or rainbow registered, sharing that information will greatly benefit the guest. And when we benefit the guest, that ultimately enhances our own businesses. And I'd also like to show you this table created by Dr. Bob Willard, who's a Canadian author and sustainability researcher. And some of his research from the early 2000s, he found that businesses that adopted sustainable practices can increase their profits by 51% to 81%. That's huge. And we're not going to dive too deeply into these numbers, but I do want to pull your attention to a few key points. So if you look at line items 2 through 4, reducing energy, reducing waste, and materials, these are sort of the immediate impacts of sustainability. For example, if you swap from an incandescent light bulb to LED, that's easy. You make a switch. Now you're using less energy, spending less money, and being more sustainable. However, when we look at line items 1, 5, and 6, increasing revenues, increasing employee productivity, reducing employee turnover expenses capturing these benefits really requires you to share your sustainability story. So to benefit from the opportunity for increased revenue, you need to be able to speak to those actions that you're taking, which will allow you to attract and retain those eco-conscious consumers. Similarly, if you are developing a new sustainable product or experience, you have to be able to speak to that in order to capture that increase in revenue. On that more internal side, with reducing employee turnover expenses, staff need to be brought in and trained on that sustainability vision and those actions so that they have the opportunity to contribute to a more sustainable future. It's your staff recognizing that they're coming to this job for more than the paycheck, but to better the world. And in order to capture the benefits, whether that's the increase in revenue or reduced costs, you have to share that story. So how can we share our sustainability stories while avoiding greenwashing, not green hushing, but also be able to capitalize on those benefits? I'm going to now dive deeper into those best practices. And the biggest piece of advice I can give is to live your sustainability story. Bring that passion and the purpose that you've shared from previous webinars and all of the activities that we've done together and apply that to your actions. And the golden rule here is to act first and share second. Act first and share second. This really prevents you from marketing any false or unsupported claims, and it allows you to showcase what is currently happening, what is underway. And that's what people are often most interested in. So when you share on the actions that are already underway, it also aligns with the principles of regenerative tourism, because now visitors or community members can learn about what you're doing and also adapt or adopt those actions. So this is your purpose and your passion, living your sustainability story. And with that, we also need direction. So purpose and passion without direction can kind of lead us in circles. But with the sustainability action plan, we have something that ties all of these components together and explains where is this all going. And that's using those goals and targets in a meaningful and purposeful way. And this is also a very valuable marketing tool because it's a great source of stories. As you take action, as you lead these initiatives, they turn into pieces of content that you can speak to or stories that you can share with, be that your guests, your staff, or your visitors. But in aligning to this best practice of establishing transparency and trust, the action plan is such a great resource. When used consistently, the action plan helps to track your progress and can indicate if you're ahead, if you're on track, or behind for a goal or target. And including both in your sustainability story is powerful, and it also makes it understandable and relatable. Nobody is perfect, and we all have room to grow. And it's a journey, it's ongoing, it's a cycle. So remember that a missed target today is just an opportunity for tomorrow. And while we may all strive for excellence, creating these meaningful changes takes time. And there's a lot to learn, and there's also a lot of opportunity to share. So maybe you're the one paving the way and having to break down these barriers, or maybe you're fortunate and you have someone in your community that you can look to. But by sharing where you celebrate your wins, but also acknowledge your setbacks, that can be very powerful, not only in combating greenwashing, but creating that meaningful and authentic story. Which leads me to the last best practice that I'd really like to emphasize today, which is collaboration. I've already seen in the chat that collaboration is crucial for some of you guys, and I love to see that it is ongoing. And I have a lot of good news because everyone today is on the right track. You're collaborating with FAB, you're collaborating with GreenStep, and throughout this webinar series, you've been collaborating with each other, sharing experiences, sharing your perspectives. And as you share your sustainability story, you'll be building on the momentum of this webinar. And maybe you'll be building on some wins that are currently happening within your organization or your community. And something to keep in mind is that while some initiatives may seem small or insignificant, By taking action and sharing that action, you can inspire others to follow. And when you think about your sphere of influence, all of the stakeholders and people that you interact with, it goes well beyond just your visitors or your staff. And it can include your community members or people you buy from or people you sell to. So let's apply this to zero waste. If your goal is to cut all single-use plastic, then that means you're going to have to go upstream to your supplier. You're going to have to share this vision of a more sustainable future and then work with them. What is it going to take to make this happen? And this is where being transparent is really important, because where there's shortcomings, other people here may have experienced this before, and they may know how to navigate and communicate with your supplier or your buyer. But by acting first and sharing second, by taking that initiative, you'll develop these powerful initiatives that not only combat greenwashing, but position your organization as well as the entire Frontenac Arch biosphere as a sustainability leader. So with these best practices in mind, there are many different places where you may share your sustainability story. This could be a digital space, such as on a website, in your email or signature, or a letterhead. If you're a brick and mortar store, maybe there's opportunities to use a sticker decal, use it on a sign, a price board, or on an outdoor space. Maybe that's signage for interpretive trails at kiosks and so on. And really, the key here is sharing your sustainability story lets you capture all of those benefits that we've covered this evening. And as you share your sustainability story, you're contributing to the progress of the sustainability of the destination, to such a degree that we actually include these elements of storytelling and sharing in our sustainable tourism assessment. So as you go through that assessment, maybe next year or in 2 years, and you reassess your performance, if you're sharing your sustainability story, then you'll be able to earn more points and track your progress and see how you've grown, because your audience is your sphere of influence. We're inspiring people by taking course of action. So there's many different ways to market sustainability. And now I would like to share on one of them, the FAB badge. So what is the FAB badge? The FAB badge is a logo that can be used to help visitors, guests, employees, and other stakeholders identify that your organization is aligned on sustainability initiatives. So for me, the FAB badge is really this representation of all of the learning, the sharing, the exercises that have gone into this workshop series. It's a visual representation of the growth and all of the hours we've shared together. But the FAB badge also seeks to capture this power of regional branding. So essentially, the more businesses that achieve and use the FAB badge, the stronger the Frontenac Arch Biosphere reputation for sustainability becomes. So as guests or visitors come to FAB and have these great experiences and they see the FAB logo, they'll seek out other organizations with similar values-driven approaches. And not only does this drive business through visitor attraction and retention, but again, it touches on those key principles of regenerative tourism, where it educates and transforms visitors so they can bring back those approaches to sustainability to their own communities. Lastly, this FAB badge, it allows you to showcase your organization's alignment to a larger community, maybe even municipal or provincial or a tourism industry initiative. It shows that you stand with your peers and are taking specific actions to improve the sustainability performance, not only of your business, but of the broader region. And it's this recognition that your contributions make a difference in the big picture. So how do you earn this FAB badge? Well, you have to have attended all 4 of the webinars. However, if you have missed a webinar, they can be found on the FAB business page as well as YouTube channel, which we've shared, I believe, a link to in the chat. We'll touch on it a little bit later. And Noelle, is there anything else you would like to share around earning the FAB badge?
Yeah, I think you covered all of it. I just wanted to say it also serves a little bit as a reminder as well. When you see this on your building, it's kind of a reminder that you're still in your sustainable journey, and to carry on with those practices. And like you said, it's an ongoing process. So the badge isn't really an ending statement. It's kind of just the beginning of your journey, taking the information that you've learned through this webinar series and carrying that forward. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, that's great. And it's so true. It's ongoing. And, when we think about where do we use our FAB badge to be reminded that we are still learning, we're still growing, there are many different places. And this is going to look different for each organization. So when I was brainstorming this slide, the three main spaces that I thought of were on that digital space, which could be the website, your email signature, it could be on social media, your letterheads. If you're in a brick and mortar store, again, the signage or sharing directly to your guests, sharing that story verbally. And then in natural spaces, using that on interpretive signage. So when visitors walk through the forest and they're learning about the different trees and species, understanding that it's more than just education. It's a contribution to a more sustainable future. And this can be shared in many different places, whether that's at a kiosk, at a park or trailhead, or at some place within your organization. This will really be unique to how your organization operates. And then because this FAB badge is just the beginning, it's also a great way to draw attention to current initiatives and ways to engage the community. So you may wish to include next to your FAB badge, maybe a flyer for a community event around sustainability, or a QR code that brings you to a web page that keeps you up to date with the latest initiatives and actions, or even a survey to engage the community and understand how do we support people. So I've been talking a lot and sharing my interpretation of the FAB badge, but ultimately this is up to you. So I'd like you to imagine, and we're going to go into an exercise in just a moment, but just take a moment to imagine that a guest or staff member sees this badge and asks you, what does it mean? And in the next exercise, we're going to create an elevator pitch that is going to be our around 1 minute response to a question of this nature. Someone comes up and they sees the FAB badge in your window and they say, hey, what does that mean? So now we're going to give you about 10 minutes of thinking time to go over these questions. And you might want to include elements from that sustainability journey that we wrote down earlier, or resources such as your vision and the action plan or the assessment. But take some time, address the prompt, and then remember there are prizes for sharing. And I see that Tanya has shared hers in the chat. I really appreciate you doing that. I love to see it. And we'll also have the opportunity to share to the larger group, but we have about 3 or 4 more minutes left to think on this. And once you finish your writing it, I'd also like you to take some time to reflect and read back to it, and maybe even mute yourself and read it aloud to hear yourself say it. We'll give you guys about 1 more minute, and if that's okay, I'm going to read the ones in the chat and then also invite everyone else to share if anyone wants to read it to the group. All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading. And remember that we're sharing, we're inspiring each other. And maybe there's something you take away from each of these statements. So Tanya says, Right Time's online farm directories are making a difference in your community, one listing, one story, and one directory at a time. We share online, saving trees and shining a spotlight on our local businesses and organizations, encouraging people to shop, stay, and play local. That's awesome. That's a great story to say and share around the FAB batch. Jeff, badge is an effective standard of norms and a community of common principles. A community of common principles. That is amazing. I love that idea that it's all of these people. You see this badge and you recognize that we live to this standard. We have this norm of excellence when it comes to sustainability. That's great. Mary, I think if one has the badge, one should be able to explain to an interested person what was achieved in order to earn the badge, and also what the commitment they are making to a better future. Each business or group could develop their own specific answer that best relates to their own context, as well as provides interested folks with their explanation as to why it's important, not only to them, their business, but also in terms of achieving sustainable development targets. And you hit on a few really interesting things here. Yes, sustainability is different for each organization. And then what targets that people are trying to advance, that is going to be very, very unique and tailored to a specific person. So to try to capture that all in just a badge, which is really cool that the badge can do that, yet lead to so many unique stories underneath of it. From Alberto, the FAB badge means that sustainability is the foundation of all we do and the filter we use to make decisions. We earn the badge by completing a comprehensive plan that identifies what we are doing well and areas for improvement. The badge assures our clients, our community, to constantly improve on all areas of sustainability, and that together we're making the world a better place. I love how you touched on all of those best practices in there. That's great. Yeah, lots of support from all your peers. All right. I see there's some opportunity for support. Because I'm a part of a volunteer group in our village, and one of the things we're looking at is writing a business proposal for a building that we believe is essential. I think adding the necessity for it being sustainable is imperative. There is some powerful language and some powerful ideas that I think you can apply from what has already been shared. And then, I mean, even using that FAB badge as a logo to demonstrate that, you know, you might not be able to see that all the lights are LED or that the water in the faucets are low flow. But when you see that FAB badge, that's what it represents, that this building has been built to those standards and with those principles. Would anyone else like to share or provide any feedback? Thank you guys for being super interactive with the chat. That's awesome.
So can I say one thing, Adam?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is a fabulous amount of enthusiasm, and you guys completely have the idea. I just want to remind you, it's an elevator chat. So the idea is to provide the information, but not overwhelm your guest. I don't want to start lecturing your guests for 20 minutes because that will certainly turn people off.
And keep in mind, the best way to share is through a conversation, you know, understanding what's their experience with it, and tapping into that curiosity. Yeah, great point, Christy. All right, we got a few more coming in. A badge like the FAB badge might help local companies and people of the community to build associativity in the region, as it shows you're a part of the initiative. And this is very important to promote broader collaboration. Totally agree. All right. So I'm going to move on. And these stories were really emphasizing the importance of that external communication. And thank you everyone for sharing. But I'd also like to remind you that a lot of these benefits are sharing. And as you addressed in some of your stories, they involve your community and your team and your staff. So to give you some ideas around how to approach sustainability communication on more of that internal side, I've provided a checklist of actions that can be taken to drive change, build transparency and trust, and then enhance collaboration. So I'm going to send you this in a follow-up where you'll have access to the slide deck, but we'll just run through a couple of them right now. Engaging with the DMO and inviting staff or community members to partake in trainings and volunteer opportunities. If you're here today or watching this video after, check, you're doing that. But remember, this is ongoing. You should continue to engage and seek to bring others into this process. Partaking in local, provincial, or global celebrations such as Earth Day and creating opportunities for engagement around that. Sharing your action plan and opportunities. This could be in a lunchroom or at a town hall or on a community bulletin or social media. There's many ways to bring people into your plan. And then hosting those quarterly or annual meetings where you can compare your plans, whether that's within your own team, or maybe you have a group of friends or have a group of business owners that comes together to address these issues. And then again, using that formal report, if you choose to go that direction, as a means of benchmarking your progress year to year, as well as adding that layer of authenticity and transparency to your communications. Another thing that is important is that you may be having several employees or interns or summer help, these seasonal employees, or as your organization grows, it's important to attract people that align to your sustainability values. And by including these kinds of statements in your job descriptions, it'll help you bring in the employees that you're searching for. But it'll also benefit the employee because their understanding of the day-to-day job will be broadened to understand the larger contributions your organization is trying to make. So remember, what may be normal or regular course of action for you could be totally new to others, especially people new to the community or region. So I want to share a quick story about an encounter that I had with this exactly. So when I was younger, I spent some time traveling through southern Spain and find myself living on a small hostel in a ranch in a community called El Chorro near Sevilla. And one afternoon I was doing dishes and an employee runs over and says, "Stop, stop, 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 stop. What are you doing?" And I looked at her so confused. What do you mean, what am I doing? I'm washing the dishes. And she responded with, like, "You left the water running. Why would you do that?" And she clearly saw that I was still confused because I had no clue I was doing anything wrong. And she went and explained things a little bit further, that this community of El Chorro had been in a severe drought for many, many years, and that water conservation was incredibly important for that community, and that you should be conserving water whenever and however possible. Essentially, never leave the water running if you're not using it, which I was in the wrong when I was doing dishes. And while this felt like at first like a bit of a slap on the wrist, like I'd done something wrong, the lesson around that community's environmental and drought struggles really resonated with me. And I came to understand that local culture of conservation. And in the end, not only did I respect to it, but I now live by it. And that correction that I received came from an employee of that hostel. That employee also was not a local. She was from England, but she was connected to that community and trained on their sustainability initiatives. And that training, as I've reflected on this experience, it really became clear that she wasn't just trained on what to do, but why she should do that. And for me, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know about water conservation at that time, and I didn't know about the struggles of the community with the drought. So when that employee corrected me, I didn't feel like I was getting in trouble when she shared with me the backstory and the why behind the action. But it felt like I was learning a lesson. And that's actually a lesson that I still carry with me today and has really become a powerful drive for why I work with regenerative tourism. And it's taking that time to train and share with people, even these things that we see are kind of commonplace, to create this culture of change and capture that power of tourism to educate and share. And tourism really does have this power to create change. It has the power to create a culture of sustainability. And ultimately, the more people that take these sustainable approaches, the more that we share and educate and leverage the power of that FAB badge, the greater the culture of sustainability becomes. And what this means is that eventually sustainability is just going to become the norm. It just becomes how things get done. It's kind of like health and safety. So when you go into a new building or you start a new job and they talk about where all the emergency exits are, maybe one day that's how we approach where compost bins are or recycling bins are too. And this whole process begins by sharing your sustainability vision and the actions you're taking today, as well as that plan. And perhaps as your action plan grows and the needs to make it happen grow too, you create a green team, whether that's from your own business or within members of your community. You form this group of people who is passionate and dedicated and want to take responsibility for that action plan and take it to the next level. And when that happens, sustainability becomes part of your decision-making process. And then decision-making leads to messaging. And pretty soon there's opportunities not only for your organization to be involved in sustainability, but also your guests, leading to stories of success and awards and innovations and experiences that, like I shared with you, where you have these powerful learnings that get brought back home. But this all starts from those visions and those actions that we take today. So before we wrap up with the final section with additional resources, I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions. about anything that we've covered so far. I'd also like to throw this out to the group. If you have an action that you would like to share a sustainability story around, but would like some feedback, I'm happy to help. The group here is happy to help. So we'll give everyone just a moment or two, think of some questions, or if there's an action you would like some support on developing a story around. And don't worry, these 2 minutes of silence will feel like forever for me too. Alrighty, so we're going to keep moving on. If you do have a question or would like some feedback or some input from the group, throw it in the chat. We'll make sure that gets addressed. We're going to wrap up with our final section now of some additional resources. And there are lots available, but I'd like to point you towards a few local resources that might benefit you on your journey. So that first resource being the FAB Pledge. So in addition to this webinar series, an opportunity you can take advantage of is the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Pledge, which is based off the National Geographic Society and Destination Stewardship Center. And taking this pledge and sharing it with your staff and customers demonstrates leadership and sustainability. And this pledge is available on the FAB page. And we can also send you a follow-up in an email. And then how you use that pledge can also be quite powerful as well. You might wish to print out the pledge and hang it in your building so guests can see your commitment, or incorporate some elements of it into a sustainability webpage, or even hang it next to a business license as a reminder as to why you're taking these initiatives. Because sustainability isn't always easy, we know that. But there's times that we might lack motivation. But maybe when you look at this pledge, you remember that your commitment to a more sustainable future is more than just motivation. It's dedication to improving the lives and the planet and our communities. Another resource I'd like you to direct you to is GreenStep. We have lots and lots of blog posts and extensive resources around marketing and sharing your sustainability story, in addition to many other useful tools and products, as well as our own Sustainable Tourism 2030 pledge. We can also link to that as well. And last but not least, the FAB business webpage. So here is a place where you can find all of those webinars in a central location. You can connect with other businesses, find a link to that sustainability pledge, and share on the FAB gallery. And we did it. Congratulations. We've made it through the webinar series. Woohoo! It's been such a privilege to work with you guys, and I'm really excited to follow along on your sustainability journeys. And a member from GreenStep will be reaching out to you soon with a certificate of completion for those of you who have participated in each of the workshops, as well as revisited those workshops you missed online. I do want to quickly distinguish that this is a certificate of completion, not a sustainability certification. And thank you for joining us. This was our first round through this cycle of continuous improvement. And I hope that you continue on this journey, because there's always more to learn, measure, plan, act, grow, implement, advance, celebrate. Lots of successes and setbacks, but it's a journey. And if you have any questions, we're going to have some question time at the end for some discussion and reflection, but want you to be able to note down our emails: adam@greenstep.ca, christy@greenstep.ca. We are here to help you guys and support you guys on your journeys. And we are now going to finish up with a short inspirational film before offering some time for reflection and discussion. So Christy, would you like to cue that up?
Yep.
My name's Lane Craig. This is 40 Knots Vineyard and Estate Winery. Sustainability, or environmental sustainability, it's a big word like marmalade. You know what? Marmalade's just jam. Sustainability is as simple as sustaining life on this planet in balance. At 40 Knots, immediately upon taking over, we began our conversion to biodynamic farming and biodynamic wines. Culturing native ladybugs, not using chemicals that are not certified organically or biodynamically. Educating people, educating youth, educating adults on what sustainability is. Making a conscious change in our valley, on our island, and in our country to be part of the cure and not part of the problem. Our goal here is to leave something for the great-great-great-grandchildren to be proud of, to be healthy with, and to grow it even further, to regain that balance that our Earth once had.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Christy. A great example of an organization from our coast that is really leading the charge, small business based out of Comox that is making a big impact. So again, just a few moments to sit in silence and reflect. Maybe you got your pen and paper handy. And we've covered a lot today. We've covered a lot in the last 4 webinar series. And with all of this ground, if there's any questions that you had, we're going to invite you first before you share to any of the group or in the chat, just write them down and take a few moments to sit in silence and just think back on where we've come and if there's anything that you may need further clarification around or are unsure about. And you could just write that down and we'll give you some time to sit and think on that. Okay, so there are a few questions in the chat that I'm going to address first before opening up to the room for other questions. So GreenStep offers a sustainable tourism certification. So that certification is the same as that sustainable tourism assessment process, but instead, as you go through that, you need to submit evidence. So things that you may have guessed on as far as your sustainability performance now needs to go one step further and become documented and submitted as evidence to support and show that these initiatives or these actions are currently underway. That assessment process is very similar to what we've already undergone with developing an action plan, but the end result is then being verified under some high detail, and then as well as gaining some time with a consultant to create an action plan before being issued a sustainability certification. And those can be issued at the levels, again, matching what we've done in the assessment thus far: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And that needs to be reassessed every 2 years. The next question: how does this program align with or meet the objectives of the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario's Sustainable Tourism 2030 Pledge, which is also being supported by GreenStep? How do they differ? Does participation in FAB imply participation in TIO, or are they completely different? And this is where I'm going to break this up into a few parts. So the first distinction that I'd like to make is that the Sustainable Tourism 2030 Pledge with TIO is separate from the Frontenac Arch Biosphere Sustainability Pledge. They're both great, and they both offer a lot. With that TIO Sustainable Tourism 2030 Pledge, you already meet a number of the requirements, one of which was taking that assessment. The other requirement behind that is then making a public commitment about joining the Stance for Sustainable Tourism, and that can be done quite easily. So by following the webinar, you are already well on your way to completing all of the requirements, but by participating in this webinar, that does not automatically enroll you. You need to go back through and do that, initiate in that step. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
I was just going to ask if you had any recommendations for all of us on what would be our greatest resource moving forward following this webinar series, in terms of if there's an email list that we can subscribe to, for lack of a better word, like a word of the day calendar on sustainability is what I wrote down, so that we have those reminders and that we're carrying this in the forefront of our mind, what we've learned on sustainability, so that we don't end here. So I'm curious. I'm sure GreenStep has a mailing list that we can join and subscribe to. But yeah, so that was my question.
There are some really great podcasts on sustainability, and I love podcasts because I can listen to them and do something else at the same time. So I have a list somewhere that I could send you, Noelle.
I love that, and I can send that out as well in our follow-up email. Thanks, Cindy.
Yep, and GreenStep does have our own sustainable tourism newsletter. So we provide lots of resources there, as well as in the blog. And then a few other organizations that have newsletters as well that will offer some best practices include the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, and there are a number of others that I can include in a follow-up email as well. All righty. And if you also have any other questions, feel free to email us again. You might not have, they might come to you later this evening or tomorrow, but we're here to help.
And before you leave, please click on the link in the chat and take our final survey. It's just 8 questions, so it's very quick to get through and it really helps us.
I just wanted to take a second and thank everybody. And I also want to thank you guys from GreenStep as well for all of your help in facilitating this webinar series. You guys just go above and beyond, and we appreciate everything that you do and all the time that went into creating the slide decks for these and helping us out along the way. So I super appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. I didn't get a chance to give away some of my swag, so I just wanted to say that everybody that shared in the chat tonight is going to go home with something. So I have all of your mailing lists. So we'll be sending out some FAB swag, everything that we have in our FAB shop. Actually, I shouldn't say everything because that would be greenwashing. Let me verify. But most of the things are organic. We've chosen organic products. So I just wanted to mention that. We also have environmentally friendly things. So some of you will get to have, for water conservation, you'll get to have the reusable water bottles and things like that. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate all of our businesses, our stakeholders for participating in this series. And we'll be following up with our last follow-up email and sending out those links to you guys as well. So thank you all so much.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And you will be receiving that certificate very soon.
Thanks so much, everyone. And with that, I will stop our recording.